What's up guys, Lord Hezion here, back with another video which doesn't seem to make any sense at first, but I promise it does. So in my line of work, I'm obligated and approached by tons of people to suggest a phone for them depending on certain aspects like price, battery life, screen size and resolution, and a lot lately, camera. Check my DMs and you'll find questions like, hey Lord Hezion, I've got this much cash, what good smartphone camera can I get for that money? Such stuff. We generally expect the price of a device to be directly correlated with its value. If a company has a lineup, its cheapest device is supposed to be the worst one, and the most expensive device is supposed to be the best one. Lately, this isn't true anymore. Not only is the gap between flagship and mid-range phones narrowing by the day, but depending on which phones you compare and which aspects of a phone you find most important, it's very possible that you'll find a mid-range phone that is not just a better deal for your money, but actually a better device for you overall. Samsung's Galaxy A series devices depict this behavior pretty well, especially the Galaxy A51 and the Galaxy A71. In fact, if you're talking numbers, the Galaxy A51 became so popular this year that it outsold Samsung's flagship Galaxy S20 series in just Q1 of this year, something we've never seen in the history of Samsung Galaxy S series phones, where it was outsold by a mid-range phone under half the price. And I concluded that the A51's affordable price, competitive specs, and awesome camera are the reason why. So why pick a flagship phone from last year for this test? Well, I'm basically going to try and answer the question, should you spend money on a 2020 mid-range device with upgraded specs, performance, right compromises to save cost and camera, or spend on last year's device, which depending on season deals you might pick up for the same price as the 2020 mid-range device. And for this test, I'm solely going to focus on cameras. As with all my camera comparison tests, let's start with the camera specs on both phones. The Samsung Galaxy S10 camera from 2019 sports a triple camera setup with a 12 megapixel f1.5 wide-angle lens with optical image stabilization built in, a 12 megapixel f2.4 telephoto lens with 2x optical zoom, and a 16 megapixel f2.2 ultra-wide lens with a super steady video feature. The Samsung Galaxy A51 sports a quad camera setup. Here we find a 48 megapixel f2.2 wide-angle lens, a 12 megapixel f2.2 ultra-wide lens, a 5 megapixel macro lens, and a 5 megapixel f2.2 depth sensor. You don't get optical image stabilization or super steady mode, and the phone is capable of shooting 4K footage up to 30 frames per second. Decent, if not impressive numbers on both phones, but how do they stack up in real life? Well, for this test, we'll use my friend Kate as a subject to use more human subjects for rare camera shots just to broaden the perspective. Tell you what, if we get 2,000 subs after this video goes up, we'll bring Kate back to do an unboxing video. So let's talk about the ultra-wide angle shots on both phones. At first glance, the Galaxy A51 seems to fit way more into one shot compared to the Galaxy S10. This remained true and consistent the more I played around with the ultra-wide mode on both phones. In terms of colors and clarity, I feel like the scene optimizer on the Galaxy A51 brings out more punch in the objects, example the Hedge compared to the S10. In terms of clarity, both devices do put out very clear images consistently, and this is without tinkering with the exposure settings. Just point and shoot. In terms of dynamic range, everything is spot on and it's kind of difficult to tell the difference in some shots. Something I should mention is I noticed this unintended blur of fringing of the edges on the Galaxy A51 shots that aren't present in the S10 shots, almost as if the shot was taken on a windy day with trees swaying all over, which is not the case. Could this be a result of the wider angle on the A51 than the S10, or is this an issue in post-image processing? All the same, it didn't seem to be a consistent glitch, but it popped up from time to time and it's something worth noting. In terms of wide-angle photos, we can still see the A51 fitting more into one shot compared to the S10. At this point, I also noted that the scene optimizer on the Galaxy S10 took quite some time figuring out the scene I was trying to take photos of compared to the A51, which is almost instantaneous. Some of the shots on the A51 appeared cloudy and just a tiny bit washed out, meaning I had to take manual control of exposure settings to bring out the best shots of the scene. Dynamic range in this mode seems to be more accurate on the S10 due to the reason I've mentioned earlier on the A51. Colors look accurate, rich and natural, and either way you look at it, I think the S10 does a much better job of keeping everything composed and stable without tinkering with exposure settings. What do you think about the wide angle pictures on both phones? Can you notice the color variation in the lens, especially the green example in this shot? Now, this is a perfect segue for me to introduce an issue of contention that had the A51 really blow my mind. From the spec sheet, the S10 sports a dedicated 12 megapixel 2x optical zoom telephoto lens. This means that zooming into 2x sees no degradation in photo quality. On the other hand, the A51 doesn't have a telephoto lens, meaning zooming into 2x is done digitally. All the same, surprisingly, the A51 puts out images with similar clarity to the Galaxy S10's telephoto lens. Pretty interesting results. Yes, HDR coupled with the scene optimizer on the S10 does bring out more clarity, colors and punch and detail in the shot, but the shots from the A51 are almost at par with those of the S10, and this is without a dedicated telephoto lens. These results were consistent in every shot I took, and that's a bold statement from the Galaxy A51. Up next, we look at the portrait shots on both phones. These are some very clean, nice, detailed portrait shots. If you focus your attention to her hair, you can see the A51 kind of feathering the edges of the hair compared to the S10 that made up for the thin focus by evenly laying the blur on the edges of the hair. All in all, can we just give props to how the edge mapping on both phones is accurate and impressive. There's no blur spilling into focus, and this just goes to show how mid-range phones have really caught up to flagship cameras. While we're at it, let's talk about macro shots from both phones. Well, macro shots on the A51 are good, impressive and detailed, but its presence doesn't really make sense because the S10 lacks a macro lens, but hold the phone close to the objects you want to take a shot of and it does a stellar job. In fact, I like the macro shots on the S10 compared to the A51 shots. It's just a matter of personal preference. In terms of video, we can see the optical image stabilization on the S10 do a better job when shooting video in motion, and still, that's not to say that the A51 is doing a bad job. The difference isn't night and day, and that electronic image stabilization on the A51 is actually doing a good job keeping up. I also noticed that the S10 allows you to change between the wide and ultra-wide lenses compared to the A51 that locks video on one lens. In terms of audio quality, I'm going to let you decide. Notice that on the S10, you actually get a chance to switch between the lenses as you record, but you don't get that on A51. So you guys tell me how that footage is and how the sound quality of the video is. Enough about the rear cameras, and let's flip to the front-facing cameras. Let's talk about the quality of that 32 megapixel selfie camera compared to the 10 megapixel selfie camera on the S10. Portrait shots of both phones are very clear and detailed. The blur is mapped out pretty well, and here we don't see that hair feathering or blurring. Color temperature on both shots are almost identical, and it's very hard to tell which is which without the labels on the photos. In terms of wide angle shots, I feel like the A51 does a better job with bringing out the skin tones compared to the S10 that opts to keep things calm and natural and slightly overexposed. In terms of ultra-wide selfies, we can see the A51 allowing you to fetch much more into one shot compared to the S10. And even here, we see the same color temperature difference and difference in skin tones on both phones. Also note that these shots were taken at the same exposure with beauty mode turned all the way off. From the selfie samples on both phones, you can also discern how the S10 really blows out the background objects like the sky, and some of that washes out to objects in the middle ground of the shots, as compared to the A51 that quickly balances everything out before the shot is taken. In terms of front-facing video quality, I think the Galaxy A51 takes the cake here. Not only does it allow you to fit much more into one frame, but how it handles exposure and color accuracy feels miles better than what you get on the S10. These are both 4K at 30 frames per second videos, but the A51 just blows the S10 out of the water. Top that off with audio quality, which is again miles ahead of the A51 compared to what you get on the S10. So far, the A51 just seems a better deal for you guys that do a lot of vlogging on your phone. What do you think about that footage? Which do you prefer? I can't decide. A51 is blowing my mind right now. How about when we move around? Yeah, so the A51 got that update to fix the what did it call it? What did it talk about? To fix the color temperature issue. So right now it's holding up pretty well. We can't see any changes in color temperature, and I kind of like the background bokeh coming in naturally from the Galaxy S10. Pretty interesting. So at this point, I've managed to explain why this test makes a lot of sense. I've said this a lot in my camera comparison videos. Mid-range smartphone cameras are going up against flagship cameras and competing very hard, and at times even beating flagship cameras. That holds true in this test. It's got to a point where you're better off spending your hard-earned money on a mid-range device and giving up some flagship specs like a telephoto lens or intricacies like wireless charging and other bells and whistles that make flagship devices, and just going with a mid-range device that makes the right compromises but delivers on the most important aspects that make you decide on buying a phone. Some of you might ask why I didn't put the A51 against an S lineup device from this year, like say the S20, and that comes down to the price. As it is right now, you can pick up S10 on deals and offers close to what you'll give to buy the A51 compared to the S20 line that doubles and almost triples the A51. So that's been it. Massive thanks for watching. Remember, we'll bring back Cage to do a phone unboxing when we hit 2000 subs, so smash that subscribe button if you haven't and turn on that notification bell so you're notified whenever I make an upload. Share this video with your friends, it will really make my day. Hit that like button, it helps the channel a lot. That's been it. This is Lord Hezion. See you in the next one.